We had a plethora of visitors joining us for adoration. It's actually lovely to see people coming back to visit and to arrange to come and see so that we don't overcrowd things too much at any rate. But lovely to have visitors from all over. So Marie and Tom Blessing very kindly popped up from Nina in County Tipperary and spent the night in prayer here. By arrangement, of course, if you'd like to come and do some time in adoration, please do give us a call here and get in touch, and we'll add you certainly to the rota as well. And lovely to see the three ladies, Gertie and Bernadette and Susan from Cork, Knock Mayo, and from Galway as well. So great they could come. So we had people from far and wide joining us for prayer over the last while. So the 40 days and 40 nights of adoration continues. It's a great blessing indeed. We have 2 days completed now. And do keep an eye out. We posted up some live video of the adoration for you. We hope we can get into a little pattern or rhythm with that as well. And also, just chatting with Aidan, please God, will share a holy hour that I'd like to be able to do a regular holy hour indeed myself with you. We were thinking we might tie it in with evening prayer, and the evening rosary might be the nicest part of the day maybe to accommodate that, and I can pray with you as well. And we can just push to one side the Vatican news. So that's our thought on that. We're all the time sort of planning and scheming and trying to work out how we might piece all this together. So our 40 days and 40 nights, 2 days done, another 38 to go, and just thanks indeed to all who so kindly have taken the time to come and spend hours before the Lord here to help keep that presence continuous. And it's for faith and for life that we might build up the life of faith in our country, praying on behalf of so many in need of prayer, so many have drifted away from the Lord, so many indeed who are quite opposed to our dear Catholic faith, and for all the wrong reasons. Very often, you know, it's the case, and here's worth noting, to be very not allow yourself to be disquieted too much by those who oppose the faith and who are quite angry or hostile. It's upsetting, certainly, for sure, but we shouldn't allow ourselves to be too overwhelmed by it, but rather feel a sense of sorrow or a sense of pity in meaning not looking on people sort of pathetically in a disparaging way, not like that at all, but a sense of pity as the Lord wept over Jerusalem. You know, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you know, all the prophets that we sent, you know, that came from God. And yet, you know, what do we have to do to show us how much we love you? That sense of pity and sorrow, that they just didn't accept the prophets. They rejected him. This is what the Lord is speaking about in the gospel today. The Son of Man will be despised and rejected and put to death and rise again. But all this according to God's plan. So there are those today, and they're not few in number, who would like to put to death the church once more, put Christ to death. And in a way they've put Christ to death, it's symbolically meaning that now, in their own lives. They've pushed God out to the margin, out to the periphery, away from themselves. And by doing so, perhaps often not realizing, have entered into a darkness or a dusk, a kind of shadiness without the light of grace. Life closes in a little bit more, doesn't it? It gets more problematic. It gets that there's no answers. There isn't the assurance of faith. Suffering and death become sort of inevitable realities to stoically confront, but there's no meaning, there's no purpose, there's no end to it. As Father Vincent Toomey had that sort of suitably nuanced title to his book, The End of Irish Catholicism. And he didn't mean, I don't think, as much as the end as in coming to an abrupt halt, but the end meaning telos in Greek, meaning the purpose, the meaning, the direction. What direction are we now going in? That's a challenging question. It's a kind of philosophical as much as a theological and spiritual one. And so can we ask the same question today, you know, to whom shall we go? What direction shall we take? So for those who would, when you find that, when people come at you, when they laugh, when they undermine or ridicule, or treat you with disdain, or your faith with disdain, we try and feel sorry for them because they're sheep without a shepherd. They're harassed and dejected, and they ridicule or they mock or they disdain what they don't know. They just don't know, um, and it's so sad. And I was just thinking in the car there this morning when I was in one of the schools I was in. I was given the task of working through the RSE policy, relationships and sexuality education, and to have a relook at it and redraft it, or propose a new direction or whatever for it. And I thought, well, here's a lovely opportunity to introduce the staff, the board of management, to the idea of the theology of the body. I was just thinking, it just came to mind as I was driving along, and it was rejected. It was just, they were referring to it in names that were like, this has no place in a school policy. And it just struck me how, again, the theology of the body is really bringing the gift of the human person into the light of God's gift of life, into the light of the gospel. And to reject that, saying this has no place in our school policy, again, it's to choose what other direction. Where are we going to look to for light instead? What will we offer? Some kind of human wisdom? Some kind of ethical plan? And then you're left asking a further question. If you want to introduce your ethical system, well, what is it based on? What's the measure? What's the standard? Who's to say, your version of what you think is ethical and good in this very important area? Who's to say your standard is right? Why not pick mine or pick someone else's? Again, you end up with human standards that we impose on it, human values, and then whose values? What values? Again, by what measure? So that's what happens when we turn away from the gospel and reject the light of the gospel, and it's a sad turn of events. I was happy at the time, actually, that incident that the staff, at least it got a small airing at the staff meeting, and there were people back and forth speaking about the theology of the body when they didn't really know what on earth they were talking about because they had never encountered the idea before. So I was happy just to throw it in there and see how it would come through in the wash. But there you are. This is our 40 days is seeking to pray with that in mind, a re-enkindling of the light of faith in the hearts and minds of our people, and to draw them back to the Lord, draw them back to, again, the gospel. What the gospel has to teach us. And only in that light then can we begin to see light and understand the nature of what's going on around us: corruption, sin, failure of our human weakness in so many areas. We can start with ourselves, of course, always with all of that, as Pope Francis likes to do. He asks for prayers for himself all the time. And so, as I was mentioning at Mass this morning, in our oratory of a small little statue of St. Peter that John Carlin brought in there to remind us to keep faithful to the Holy Father and to pray for him, and to see again the attacks and the undermining and all the things that Pope Francis is subjected to, which, as he says himself, he doesn't mind if it's against his person. He knows he's a sinner. But against this office of the Church and undermining the office of the papacy and the teaching of the Church, that raises questions. So there you are. So it's nice to have all these visitors coming, and your prayers mean such a great deal, and really it's a lovely initiative that now we can get on our knees to work, as the first reading at Mass said this morning. Rebuilding the temple. There's a job of work at hand, and it's unrelenting, and there's no slackening. There's no dragging ourselves around. To cheerfully apply ourselves to the work at hand day by day, in spite of and because of maybe the obstacles and the opposition and the challenges that come to us. And we're seeing lovely fruit, quietly and gently, not any big razzmatazz. There's no fireworks, there's no neon lights, but in small little ways. And each wonderful soul who comes to visit us here, we do hope they go home animated and uplifted and encouraged in their faith, and that they keep tuning in and listening in as well. Thanks to Bernie. She sent in a message there on Facebook a little bit earlier on. Lovely to hear from you, Bernie. And she was rejoicing really that that awful poster that I mentioned was in Belfast has been taken down. It defies the mind, and you have a caption on a big poster saying abortion is normal. Um, have we really come that far that we can normalise the taking of innocent unborn life? The mind completely just falls apart. How can we? Anyway, there was a bit of a hue and cry, and thank God that it's been taken down. And we would offer to people who think in that way to come and dialogue, come and sit with us, come and see what the truth is. Again, there's no antagonism here. There's nothing. It's not like where there's necessarily a for and against, as if starting an argument. And you know how strong I feel about that, and how Radio Maria isn't about generating that kind of heat. Rather come into the light. If somebody said if wombs had windows, and with unborn, the womb with the unborn child had a window, nobody could ever admit that abortion was normal, or even contemplate the taking of innocent unborn life. So that's a nice little counteractive, positive statement. The womb had a window. And just the child in the womb, how sacred and how precious and how important. And if it is that we've come to that stage where we can normalise the taking of unborn life, well, we're in a sad and sorrier state than perhaps we thought we are in. And I'm quite convinced that it's a relatively small number of people who think in those really strong terms, and that they are in need of a helping hand, like the St. Paul's. They lay down their cloaks at the feet of a young man called Saul as they approve the killing of St. Stephen by stoning, a very ugly, nasty way to die and be martyred. And Saul entirely approved of the killing. So if Saul can have this 180-degree conversion back to faith and become zealous in defending the church and the faith and life thereafter, we must look upon our dear brothers and sisters who think in this radical way, erroneously of course, but again as future St. Paul's or St. Pauline, and bring them back to the Lord. Turn that zeal, in the right direction. If you think of it again as energy pointed in a powerful way, but in a destructive way, and we see bring the light of the gospel on that and just turn that energy back around and point it in a very positive way. So not to condemn, but never to condone these opinions and these ideas but to, again, prayerfully seek to accompany souls and bring them back. Excuse me. There are some who keep prayerful vigil outside some of the premises where abortions are taking place in Ireland too. And again, to emphasize that it's always peaceful, it's always respectful, and it's based on faith and religion and praying rosaries, and I've done a little bit of that myself even in the United States, and it's quite the experience if it is that we used to get to meet people coming in, or those who are particularly angry and maybe offended, and not that we're seeking to offend or make anyone angry with that, but just being there and praying God's grace into that situation. And from the fabulous stories of 40 Days for Life, how people, even those involved in the surgery of the destruction of unborn life, whose lives have been completely changed. And there's some famous names. And the more recent one in the movie that's worth watching is that of the story of Abby Johnson, and as a director of an abortion clinic, seeing the witnesses outside, and then herself getting that window into the womb where she was looking after the ultrasound one day and realized that this was a living human being whose life was being taken. She was traumatized by that moment, and no doubt sustained by grace. And she'd gotten to know some of the people who used to pray quietly out there. There were, apparently, she said, some of the more militant types who would be kind of strong, and they'd probably do a bit of shouting, or that they were unhelpful. I mean, she even put that herself. They only convicted them all the more of that what they were doing was a service for women. It's a fabulous story. The book is well worth reading, and the movie too worth seeing. But she came to that point again, a Pauline moment, and because she'd gotten to know some of the quiet and gentle witnesses that were there, she went to them to say, look, I can't do this anymore. I need help to deliver myself from this. And you promised that you'd give me that help. You promised you'd support me. Well, now I want it. Now help me out of this. How do I break free of all of this? That was the beautiful witness that they gave. And please God, I would hope that would be the witness that all could give here too. Again, the quiet, gentle, supportive. There's a better way. There is a better way than taking of unborn life. It's such a huge challenge, such just enormous challenge. So when we bring all of that to prayer here on Radio Maria, as we do every day, as you know, and indeed to our 40 days of adoration, we simply invoke the power of God's grace to give the wisdom of mind and heart to those who are seeking to reach out to women in crisis and help them, those who witness to the value of life publicly and again prayerfully and peacefully, and say, look, there is another way. And grace, because it seems indeed, and it is really quite a diabolical, it's a battle, it's a fight, it's a war that's on today. There seems to be no generation without its own war. It's so much the more subtle, of course, nowadays, and the tactics of the evil one are just as prevalent, and the evil one doesn't care so long as life is lost and families are destroyed. That's his goal. He hates us so much. So our task then is to wage war, but with the weapons of a spiritual army, which is always serenity. Remember I was chatting about St. Michael the Archangel, that if you look at an image of St. Michael, you'll never see anger on his face. You'll never see him grimacing or clenching his teeth or fists or anything like that. He has the devil well subdued with chains, and usually holding his sword or maybe his spear over him under his feet. Excuse me, but his weapon is not anger, it's not aggression, it's not militant in the forceful sense. It's militant, yes, but it's with the defiance that faith offers and the tranquility and serenity that faith offers in the face of opposition. Like Our Lady, when she's depicted in her statues and images with her feet crushing the head of the serpent, she's not looking down at the serpent, she's not the least worried about him. She's her gaze, if you like, is fixed in prayer, or it's to God, and that it's effortless then as a result. It requires no conscious effort on her part to stand on the head of the serpent. She doesn't even think about it. It's because in her closeness to the Lord, in doing his will, she is waging war against the evil one, and that war is already victorious in Christ, through Christ her Son. Again, effortlessly. So Jesus, when he cast out demons, there was very little or any effort involved. He simply told them to leave, and they left. They obeyed. Such again is the power of Christ's grace. So with these grave evils which afflict us today, this and so many other areas of grave evil too, we approach it again with a certain serenity, without seeking to generate anything in the way of heat, or anger, or opposition, or ever trying to win any arguments, because it's not about winning arguments. The truth simply dissolves. All light dissolves darkness. If you light the candle, it dispels the darkness effortlessly. Once again, grace and truth dispel evil and falsehood effortlessly. And so this is interesting, just this little aside too. Frank Duff and the Legion of Mary, he was often approached by legionaries to take on a campaign or a crusade, whatever was the latest thing. Nuclear disarmament back in the 70s was one of the big ones then, still an issue of course today, but certainly from 1973 with the legalization of abortion in the US, Frank was getting letters. He died in 1980, so there's letters on file that the Legion would take on a crusade against these things. He got letters too from those wishing to take on a crusade for modesty and purity. Very interesting as well. And reading some of his correspondence and his reply to those, say, well, look, if and supposing the Legion of Mary were to take on such a mission, a crusade for modesty, well, who would decide how short the skirt should be? I think was kind of one of his just tongue-in-cheek kind of responses. And who would police these things? So he'd say, yes, we're all for modesty and purity, absolutely, and for decorum and so on. And he said, we're certainly all for life and against the destruction of innocent life. And we're certainly all for peace and the end to the build-up of nuclear arms and the prospect of violence and threat against the world that was very strong in the 60s and 70s. All these things in the 60s and 70s, and to this day, of course, too. But he didn't see that the place of a Legionary of Mary modelling themselves on Our Lady was to start a crusade, carrying banners and chanting slogans and marching here, there, and everywhere. That was not the stuff, really, of people of faith. He went far further with it, because of course he agreed, and we all do agree naturally, with the idea that there shouldn't be an accumulation of military might. And again, we should work towards modesty and decorum in dress and in conduct and all these things, and again, for life. But that how we do so is helping people to journey into the light of Christ, the light of faith. And then all of these things kind of dissolve. They find their rightful place or position. They come into alignment with the truth. That it doesn't necessarily need. I would concede that there's a time and place for marches and protests and these kind of, and an affirmative, strong action. Again, if it's done with the right, it's kind of like there's a time and place for a just war, when all possible negotiation, all possible attempts at bringing the conflict to an end have been utterly exhausted. There's a place for exerting, or indeed if it's self-defense, there's a place for exerting sufficient violent or strong armed resistance to end. It's kind of like bullying, you don't just sit there and be a doormat. It needs a kind of a strong armed resistance from time to time. There's a time and a place for all of these things, absolutely. But on the whole, to try to be a leaven in the community by way of a witness to faith and life is our task, really. Just like Our Lady, can anything good come out of Nazareth? It seems as if, did she have any impact there at all? And yet the greatest good came out of Nazareth. So it might seem that the little we do or the witness we bear seems almost insignificant, that we should be out there with the clenched fist and shouting slogans, and it seems like then we're doing something about it. But we perhaps miss the point that it's divine grace that's necessary in this just enormous war against humanity that's being waged today. And the scale of the casualties is far beyond that of the Second World War, the First World War. Combine all the wars of the past, the Korean War, Vietnam, the last century, and go back further. This is a war, and they talked. Was it the First World War? Who was it said that was the war to end all wars? And what does it mean now, not to have violent conflict? Again, it's what's happening today. I think is far more subtle, and it demands a certain detachment from the world to be able to see it and to be aware of it and to be convicted that I have a part to play in this debacle. I've often said that there's no room for complacency or indifference when it comes to the question of life and death and life in the womb. There's no sitting on the fence. Everyone is called. There's a call to arms, if you like. And again, bear in mind the arms is prayer first, the rosary and the Holy Eucharist, the sacraments. It's a real call to conversion. And then in the way that we then live our faith fervently and fruitfully and faithfully and freely, that cannot but overspill and overflow for others to be drawn to that light. It's not hand-to-hand combat. There's no wielding of weapons one against the other. It's the wielding of the weapon of prayer and of faith that strengthens us in this battle and allows us to be gentle witnesses. maybe a good analogy is mothers in homes. How many faithful mothers, they put up with an awful lot of grief, maybe from husbands, maybe from children too. And yet, because they are, as it were, the beating heart of the home, in the midst of, you know, fractious sometimes relationships, or because we're sinners. You see, this thing, we like Pope Francis would come out and say, "Look, I'm a sinner. I'm adding to the problem when I sin, rather than helping to be a channel of grace when I'm close to the Lord." There's the battle. There's the confrontation. There's the where it takes place. So how many mothers in homes are like the beating heart of the home, and the sacrifices mothers make. This is the kind of sense of presence that I'm trying to articulate, that each of us can be in faith too, so that we are in the midst of the battle, but we're not. There's no clenched fist. There's no shouting. There's no exchanging of any violent words or action. It's witnessing to the faith and speaking out boldly when the time is necessary, gently and with conviction, when that opportunity presents itself. This is the war we're in, and it's a war for, it's life and death, for life in the womb and for the family, to keep that in the light of the truth, and to fight off all the ideologies, all the false thinking that says otherwise, says black is the new white. With so many of those ideologies today, this is where the battle is. This is where the war is, for sure. I might pause for a little piece of music. It's a lovely topic just to explore and to deepen and to challenge ourselves with. But here's the essence of our 40 days for life that brings us to that. So now maybe to do your will is a nice one. Rock O'Connor. Have we featured Rock O'Connor before? I think, Eva, that sounds familiar. So Eva's on the mixing desk looking after me there. So a little piece of music to do your will. Let me shout out our numbers as always. Many of you know them all off by heart. Or drop a comment here on Facebook and YouTube as well. Share your own thoughts on this, and maybe how are you doing in this battle? It is a battle. It's a struggle for sure. It's life and death. It's grace, eternal life, eternal death at stake. So let us know. Share with us some of your journey too, or any questions you might have likewise. So give us a text here on 089 467 2000. 089 467 2000. Put a +353 in front of that again if you're in the north or outside of Ireland. Give a call. Mary's on the phone downstairs too. I'd love to hear from you. 01 4123456 +353 1 4123456. Email info@radiomaria.ie. And like I say, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please drop a comment as well. Now, a nice piece of music for you here, and to do your will. Very appropriate, Rock O'Connor. Thanks, Eva. There's more. Good. Thank you much. back to Radio Ireland. Thanks indeed for your company here. As someone, is there something on our sound on Facebook? You might have a quick look at that. Eva was just trying to test our Facebook. And one of the listeners there was commenting there they couldn't hear so well. Might just have a quick look at that. I'm just trying it there myself and wondering, these are connections, are they all working properly? So apologies for that. If not, we might plug out the little lead on the back of the camera to improve the sound quality there. So sorry about that, anybody who's watching on Facebook there. Thanks for letting us know. That's great. We'd love to hear from you. That's important. There's no point in being on air if we're not being heard. That doesn't make any sense. That really does it. So, very good. Let's have a look here. Oh, nice to see this. There's a little square here in the Vale Star, which goes around North Cork, I think, there in bits of Limerick. That somebody posted up. I didn't know, so I think that might have been Bertie O'Rourke, maybe. That Radio Maria Ireland visited Charleville at the weekend, and give it a good shot or a good plug there. It's a fantastic resource to have with its broadcasting of prayer, lively and engaging programs, and beautiful music. Well done. That's great to have that little plug there in the newspaper, the local newspaper as well. So thanks, Daniel, for sending that in to us there as well. The Irish Centre for Padre Pio is launching a new website. Thanks to Ulrika, she sent a lovely picture of Padre Pio there at Holy Mass, and I just put it up on our what do they call that? Anyway, the heading on Facebook there, the top picture that you meet when you join on the website. Nice to just feature the saint of the day there. So the new website for the Irish Centre for Padre Pio and the National Shrine of St. Pio went live yesterday on his feast day. So it's got the usual things there on a website, and you can light a virtual candle at the National Shrine of St. Pio in Church Street in Dublin. That's the Capuchin church there as well. Oh, good, Eva, the sound is working okay. You're happy with that? Good, thanks, Eva. So apologies on Facebook if it is that you're having trouble. Maybe have a look at your own reception there, maybe, so that might be the situation too. But thanks for letting us know. But the Capuchin Church there in St. Mary the Angels, just on Church Street here, then just north of the river in Dublin, contains the National Shrine of St. Pio. I haven't been into that church for a little while. It's where Frank Duff used to go to Mass very often, and certainly towards the end of his life, because it's only a short walk from there to the hostels for the homeless that the Legion operate there in Morningstar Avenue, Brunswick Street. So let's drop in there. The church and the shrine continues to be a place of prayer, devotion and mercy. Of course, you know the Capuchins there, they have a daycare centre and they feed many homeless, or feed people in need there from there as well. Brother Kevin is based there. He was on with us here on Radio Maria some time ago, and it was lovely the Pope made a detour to visit there when he came to Dublin that time, 2018. Every Tuesday, people devoted to St. Anthony visit the shrine and participate in Holy Mass, and on the third Thursday, people also gather to participate in the monthly devotions to St. Padre Pio. The National Centre for Padre Pio has a long and faith-filled history spanning decades of devotion, work and divine intervention. From its humble beginning back in 1968, the National Centre has grown into the premier destination devoted to Padre Pio in the island of Ireland, and through new programmes and national and international pilgrimages, it continues to breathe new life into Padre Pio's mission. So check out the website padrepio.ie. That's simple, P-A-D-R-E-P-I-O, padrepio.ie. So lovely, well done to the Capuchin friars there for keeping the memory and the extraordinary life of Padre Pio before us there. Today in the UK, especially of course, is the feast day of Our Lady of Walsingham. I don't know if many of you have been to Walsingham. I've been many times when I used to live there, and enjoyed always my visit there. It's in Kent, so it's southeast of London, and very accessible, of course, when I was living in London at the time. And let me see if I can find out a little bit more about her here, about the Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham. Venerated certainly by Roman Catholics, but also Anglicans. There's actually Church of England, a strong devotion to Our Lady there, to the shrine, some indeed to the Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham. I think there's an Anglican community nearby too, so it's lovely that it's a combined shrine there. and it is associated with Marian apparitions to Richeldis de Favarèche, a pious English noblewoman. That's more of a French name, really, maybe married to a French man. And that was in 1061 in the village of Walsingham in Norfolk. So if you have that little portion of land north of London that sticks out of the back of England, as it were, Norfolk is the north of the county, Suffolk is the south county of that, East Anglia, it is East Anglia. And Walsingham is right up there. I remember doing the journey on the road. There was quite a drive from London, but always loved it, going up there out to the country. Just a lovely place. Oh, sorry, no, I'm confused now. I was saying Kent, wasn't I? That's Aylesford. Apologies. I had the two shrines in my head. Aylesford is Kent. That's the Carmelites. So scrap everything I said about Kent in southeast. And well, Walsingham is Norfolk, which is still in East Anglia. Sorry about that for the confusion. So the Holy House, there's a slipper chapel there in Walsingham. It's a lovely place of pilgrimage and a lovely place of prayer as well. In passing on his guardianship of the Holy House, Richeldis' son Geoffrey left instructions for the building of a priory at Walsingham. So the priory then passed into the care of the canons regular of St. Augustine in the 12th century. And the Augustinians were flourishing that time. And of course the Augustinian churches here in Ireland would date back to that time. There'd be other communities of Augustinian friars, ruins indeed all around Ireland likewise. So there's just a huge monastic tradition dating back to those centuries, 12th, 13th centuries there. And England has extraordinary, if you've ever seen a map of all the monasteries of England back in the day, most extraordinary. Just look at the clock, look at the time. What happened to my Chatechesis today? I have to stop, I lose my job. So Our Lady of Walsingham today, certainly pray for us. Bless England, the dowry of Our Lady too, and bless Father Andreas and as he takes up his post as priest director to Radio Maria England, and may their work indeed flourish too. We do hope to be in touch with them before too long again, please God. Overran my time, I'll lose my good job. Let's pause now for Angelus and midday prayer.